And I welcome all of you. I am pleased that we are making this history. We are recording our opinions for us to refer back with and for us to share. So I am just really glad that you are all here. And we're going to be talking about something that I love talking about, which is going to the United Nations in New York City. But first, I would like to begin with the chalice lighting. And I believe that Karen has a chalice that we will be using. Can you show us, Karen?
Yeah, here we go.
And I chose this chalice lighting. I learned it at an ICUUW meeting in the Netherlands. It was written by a British Unitarian, and I've just always liked it. The light of the Spirit is shining in you. The light of the Spirit is shining in me. The light of the Spirit is shining within. So blessed we may be. Thank you. So going to New York City it's always wonderful. It's a great place. And as I stated in the seminar, the UN has always had a special place in my heart. Even when I was in school many years ago, I would always find a way to turn many of my papers into a study of the United Nations. I had seen pictures of the United Nations, but I never really been in there and been in part of any of the official business till I attended my first CSW in 1918. This year is my fifth. This year was special because of the seminar that we had and the many people who were there. So as we were going about, we would meet people that we knew. And the purpose of this is to share what we do at CSW, what we do at the UN, and what we did at our special seminar that we had on the Saturday and Sunday between the 2 weeks of the session. And there will be several people sharing. It's not going to all be me, thank goodness. So anyway, I would like to first ask Tina. Tina is the president of the ICUUW, of the board of ICUUW. As she was explaining earlier, she now lives and teaches in New Jersey. And Tina, I believe you sometimes have the opportunity to attend UN events other than CSW. So our participation goes on throughout the year, not just at CSW. During our seminar, she provided an overview of the UN, which it's an overwhelming institution, and cutting it down shortly is pretty difficult too. And she's also going to share some other things that we talked about, including the Sustainable Development Goals. So I'm going to turn this over to Tina.
So thank you, Phyllis, for hosting us today, and welcome everyone who is here. And I see we also have early risers. We have people here for whom it is already Friday morning. So that's nice. We have people like our organization is, we have members all over the world, and we always try to find times that are good for some of us. We can't find any time that's good for all of us because we are everywhere. So Phyllis said the United Nations, our spring seminar, and the Sustainable Development Goals. She mentioned all three, and I have combined all of those into a mini presentation that I want to give you. The Commission on the Status of Women meeting opened on March 10th, and it was opened, or in the opening ceremony, the Secretary General of the United Nations spoke. And he really spoke to us, which is why I want to repeat some of his words. He said, "Allow me a particular word of welcome to our friends from civil society. You drive gender equality forward." That's us, ladies. We are civil society. Organizations like ICUUW Women were especially welcomed by the Secretary General. He then went on to say, in the face of immense obstacles, you strive to make our societies more just, more fair, more representative. Well, he definitely was right when he talked about immense obstacles. We had wanted a bunch of other women from around the world to be our representatives at CSW. And I am just mentioning a few here, Lisa and Rosie in India, Bernadette and Wilda Bernadette and Rispa in Kenya. But these young ladies, unfortunately, didn't get a visa to come to the United States or were even denied a visa. If you are from outside the United States and are even just remotely thinking of joining us next year, please start your visa application process now. It can take a year in India before you even get an appointment at the embassy. So these young women were not able to join us, but they were with us in spirit, and we hope that one day we can all be together at an event. Now, we were a very diverse group of women, and in a way you will see we were almost like a mini United Nations. We came from 8 different countries, and I think we all had a really good time at the spring seminar. So if you didn't join us this year, maybe you want to join us next year. We would be happy to have you. What is the United Nations anyhow? It's a huge organization and it has lots of different bits and pieces. We're not going to go into that, way too complicated, but let me just highlight the main ideas. The main idea is it's an organization that was founded in 1945, and it is an intergovernmental organization. Today, 193 member states are its members, which is basically the whole wide world. Okay, there's a few small countries that aren't yet members, but that's basically it. And as you can see, the General Assembly is the main body. The General Assembly is where most things happen. For us in ICUUW Women, the ECOSOC Council, the Economic and Social Council, is really important. That's where we are accredited. And the ECOSOC Council is also the council that where CSW, the Commission on the Status of Women, is housed. So that is our direct link into the United Nations. The United Nations was founded with the original overarching goal to end war, 1945, and to create peace, lasting peace. Today, it has many other areas of work. It has been mandated to look after. And the main mandate is to build a more sustainable world, to focus on collective action, to slow down climate change. So that's where we will get to the Sustainable Development Goals. On the right-hand side, you see how the United Nations work. 193 countries, every country has one vote. Whether you are big or small, rich or poor, doesn't matter. Every country has one vote. They get together, they debate an issue, they negotiate until they decide, and the decisions are mostly made on consensus. So they talk until there is consensus in the room, and then it is up to the nations to implement whatever was decided, and then it's up to organizations like us to do what we can do to help with this. The Sustainable Development Goals came out of all of these deliberations and conversations and discussions over many, many years. You see here some of the main conferences where countries came together, starting with the Earth Summit in Rio in 1992, and then the Sustainable Development Goals, the way we know them today, were agreed upon at the Sustainability Summit in 2015. So what are they? What are these goals? And where do they come from? Well, the world population has exploded. And with the explosion of the world population, we also see that the Earth systems are really stretched. In addition, people are using resources more and more. So when all of this came together, when the Earth population growing so fast and the use of the Earth resources was really stretched, people at the United Nations said, we need to do something. We need to address these two issues. And as I said a moment ago, in 2015, came up with 17 goals to address the world's issues that we are facing today. Here we have all of them, right? Here are the 17 goals. And if you take a look, the first goal is to end poverty, end hunger, ensure healthy lives, promoting equitable quality education, promoting economic growth, sustainable growth, building the resilient infrastructures, and resilient here, of course, means resilient to climate change, right? Ensuring sustainable consumption and production patterns, conserving and sustaining our oceans. So we have a slew of different goals that are all together sustainable development goals. And these goals have 169 targets, 169 very specific things that the 193 countries agreed on need to be addressed and need to be achieved for us to reach our goals. In ICUUW Women, we are particularly interested in goal number 5, the goal for gender equality. Let's have a quick look at that. This goal too has targets, no surprise, right? To end all forms of discrimination, all forms of violence, all harmful practices, to recognize unpaid work, to ensure that women have full and effective participation and equal opportunities in leadership, universal access to healthcare. When you read this, it's very much, you go and read our strategic plan for ICUUW Women, and you see it mirrors many of these, right? So we are very much aligned with these goals. Our goals are very much the goals of the United Nations. Each goal then, and I'm picking number 5 here of the goals I just gave you, each goal then has indicators where we measure. So goal number 5 was all about leadership. ICUUW Women is all about leadership. The United Nations measures that in the proportion of seats held by women, both in politics and in business. So we are now in the implementation phase and in the reporting phase. And the United Nations reports back to us how we are doing, what progress we have made, and where we need to focus moving forward. Here is the latest report from 2023 telling us that the world is not on track to achieve its gender equality goals by 2030. So we need to speed up what we're doing. If we continue at the current rate, it'll take another 140 years to achieve equal representation in leadership. And I don't think we want to wait another 140 years. So earlier this year, Genya, another member of ICUUW Women, and I went to the EcoSoc Partnership Forum, where we discussed progress on various sustainable development goals, including goal number 5. We just, many of us just attended the Commission on the Status of Women, where, for example, I attended a side event that was organized by Sweden and that enabled representatives from various countries to exchange best practices around goal number 5. And we are looking forward to attending the high-level political forum that is coming up in July, again, to look at how are we doing against goal number 5 and what do we need to do moving forward. So lots of things are happening, lots of things are going on, and our work continues. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tina. May I ask if, are there any questions? That was a lot. And maybe we can find a way to post some of these statistics or to share in a newsletter or something, because it is important for the work we do as an organization to work towards these goals as well. Learning all that and seeing all that, it's just, there's just so much that can be done at the United Nations. There are so many opportunities. And so I think part of our task is finding which opportunity to take here. And I want to address that a little later on. Carmen is a longtime member of ICUUW and our UN Advocacy Committee, and she brings a special expertise. She is from Bolivia, and she has long been active in climate action programs at UN events. And what I asked her to do to share with you, because I've always been in awe of her, is how she found her way to this and how she found her way to the United Nations and how she found a way to become part of it, to know about the forums. I've asked her to share a personal journey here.
Thank you. Well, I come from Bolivia, which is a very complicated country, especially politically. It's a very big country, is 1/9 of the United States, so it's quite big. And the thing is that we face many challenges. We really talk a lot about the North and the South, and there are still a lot of residues that come from colonization, for example. So when I was studying in college, I studied agriculture. I decided to specialize on development and on sustainable development to see what we can do in the field of agriculture to end things like hunger, for example. So that's where I learned that we need to work on policies. And as much as you want to work at national level, I dedicated almost a decade working on what became the new constitution of Bolivia, the environmental proposal. And it was very challenging because we didn't get exactly what we wanted. We got some things, but a lot of things were, let's say, tainted. So, and a lot of politics is among those lines. And at the time, we started with a very totalitarian government. So it was important to, if we wanted to change anything, to jump to the international arena. So that's where I started engaging. But also, I'm like second generation because many of my aunts, they were already aware and they had all these ideas that came from the conferences of the 90s, of the Earth Summit, of Beijing. So all these ideas were happening. And I was lucky because my family was following those issues. They were working at a time in NGOs and also doing their part. So kind of like when I came, I got to be like the continuation of that. So first I did work at national level, but got to a point that we needed to put more international pressure. So at the beginning, also is because I was learning to use, I had an email thing that 20 years ago, not everybody had. I was able to connect with people from other countries, which was something new at the time. So I was start messaging around many of these issues, and that's how I started also connecting. So it was for me, working in these issues was important, but I never thought that I was going to be able to attend to any of these meetings. I actually started working, for example, in climate change in negotiations in 2007. And it wasn't until 2013 when I was able to go to my first COP. So when I went to my first COP, it was like, okay, for me, it was like the Olympics. It still is. For many of these meetings, after one meeting finishes, then you start preparing, you start working, you start doing things for the next meeting, which is going to be in 1 year or 2 years. So that's kind of like the way I see it. You have to read the documents, see the updates, see what's happening, read the global context, and especially because the global context is changing so fast. So, for example, finance for development right now, it's a whole mess with all the tariffs and all that's happening. So, but the idea is that it's not a conference of like one time. It's a process that takes a long time because you have all these countries that they need to agree on something. And many of these countries are even at war. They have huge cultural difference. They have all these challenges, and it's one of those spaces where they can like sit down and start negotiating. And that's probably the bad thing about UN, because you, most cases, will get to the minimum, which makes everybody happy, and not the most ambitious one. But that's how you work on these conditions. And the idea is to have a global framework that we can work it more ambitiously at local level. And the work doesn't start or ends in the international level. Once you have achieved, once you have the policy, the declaration, the commitment of the governments, of the parties, the work has to be back home, either in your community, either at national level, at state level, depending. But you have all these commitments, and the idea is to at grassroots talk about these commitments. Why are these commitments important? What are they saying? And because many of the documents that come out from UN are basically like the suggestions and are basically like the policy roadmaps. So in that sense, it's important to use these tools at local level to enforce better policies from majors, from governors, depending from authorities, and where even those can be big scales, but we have to identify our local scale. Sometimes it can be a minister, for example, the local authority that can help us implement this kind of policies. So that is why it's important to identify where we are, what we can change, and all these things that have happened in UN, now in the CSW, that is focused basically on women. Now we have to get it down and start working a piece of it. We don't have to work the whole declarations. It's 22, but a piece of it around the issues that are affecting our communities. So for me, that is important, and that's how I see my work in UN. And going back home, I engage a lot with indigenous populations, for example. I engage a lot with youth, with women. We try to make these issues as easy to digest for everybody, because we think that these issues shouldn't only be like national policies. Everybody should be talking about climate change. Everybody should be talking about women's rights. gender equality, because people are starting to keep those things for granted. People are starting to give rights for granted. And it's important to acknowledge that there is progress, but we still need to keep on fighting for them. Thank you. I don't know if that's a good timing, because
No, thank you, Carmen. And what comes through as to is your ongoing passion, which is really how I think that is one of the secrets to how you did what you did, how you have gotten to where you are and know so much about the UN. So I thank you.
I also did a PowerPoint about the political declaration, but I think it's a bit too long. Maybe I can.
I think maybe we should. Right now, I would like to just continue on because we have some other presentations. I would also like to say that you've heard us talk when we go to CSW, we use the terms parallel events and side events, and side events are sponsored by member states, but NGOs like us sponsor parallel events. Side events, a lot of them are held on the UN grounds. The parallel events are held elsewhere. And Carmen, I don't know, put together, she was the guiding force and moderator of an in-person parallel event sponsored by ICUUW at CSW69. And it was held at the Baha'i Center. And the subtitle was Progress, Challenges, and Spirituality in Advancing Women's Equality. And it was done on, it was in person, but I believe it was also recorded on Zoom. Was it not, Carmen?
Yes.
It was recorded, and Carmen spoke. Her aunt was there, who had attended one of the earlier, the 15-year reflection on Beijing. It was a very, very good presentation, and I urge you to look at it. I'm assuming it will be posted on our ICUUW website. So thank you again, Carmen, and thank you for all your inspiration in guiding us.
Thank you.
In our gathering, we had two ministers from the Transylvania region of Europe. And it is very late there, so they are not on this call. But Reverend Adele Naj recorded a video that we saw at our last, at the prior one of these events. And it was so well done, and I think gives you such a good illustration of coming to New York City and attending CSW and attending our spring seminar. So I have asked that we share that video at this time.
On the 12th of March, 2025, I embarked with my colleague and good friend, Zsuzsa Barta from Kocsort, Hungary, on a trip to New York to participate in the spring seminar organized by ICUUW, which was timed to coincide with the annual conference of the UN Commission on the Status of Women. ICUUW is a nonprofit organization with a special consultative status. Joined this year's CSW event with 23 participants from USA, Canada, Transylvania, Hungary, India, and Bolivia, and organized the spring seminar on the 15th and 16th of March. This year, CSW celebrated the 30th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. In 1995, 189 countries committed themselves to promoting gender equality at the Fourth World Conference on Women in Beijing. So the main objective of this year's conference was to look back and take into account the achievements and failures. The presentations and workshops during the 3-week session focused on how gender equality has been achieved over the past 30 years, and where little or no progress has been made on this matter. Almost 800 presentations and workshops took place in parallel to the Commission's official sessions in different venues. We followed these through an app as we try to navigate the rich offer. In these workshops, nonprofits from around the world presented projects that sought solutions to challenges such as violence against women, women's access to education, healthcare, the labor market, as well as equal payment. The spring workshop was held in the impressive church of the Fourth Universalist Society, across from New York's famous Central Park. Built in the 19th century, the beautiful church is almost lost in the shadow of the skyscrapers, yet it proclaims the presence of a Unitarian Universalist denomination in the city's diverse landscape. The two-day meeting also included short presentations and small group discussions on the main theme, an introduction to and around UN institutions, programs, the Agenda 30 Sustainable Development Goals, and the role of ICUUW in promoting the UN's goals within Unitarian communities. The workshop also provided an opportunity for networking, one-to-one conversations, discussion of common goals, and reflection on the future of ICUUW. A highlight of the day was the short commemoration of the Kossuth statue on the afternoon of 15 March. This was a special national holiday for the two of us, and our Hungarian friend Gábor Kis, who lives in New Jersey, joined the group, so the three of us sang the Kossuth song at the feet of the statue. We then visited a Hungarian pastry shop in New York and were delighted to find that the pastry shop and, in general, Hungarian pastries are very popular among Americans. In addition to the conference and spring seminar programs, we also participated in two events at All Souls, the largest UU congregation in New York. One of these was the annual meeting of UUSC, an organization affiliated with the Unitarian Universalist Association, and the other was a joint event organized by All Souls Women's Alliance, with a presentation on the fourth ward meeting in September in Kolozsvár. In addition to these programs, we also took some time to visit some of the sites of New York, as you can see on my pictures. The Statue of Liberty, the Empire State Building, Central Park, Rockefeller Square, Grand Central Station, the 9/11 Memorial, Trinity Church, the New York Public Library, and of course the unmissable Times Square were all on display in the glorious New York sunshine. Walking between them, but rather hurrying, we had the feeling that the sun was shining through the skyscrapers in New York. For making our short but very meaningful trip to the U.S. possible, we are grateful for the support we received from ICUUW, the Ferenc Balázs Scholarship Committee, the Hungarian Unitarian Church, and our friend Karen Still, who welcomed us into her home while we were there. We also thank UNOS for the small gifts that we were able to give to the workshop participants. I would like to thank you, all of you, Tina, Carol, Genya, Julie, Phyllis, and each of you for learning together, for being together. This was a rich experience for me and for for both of us. It was inspiring and it was uplifting. And may we continue the good work to alleviate the suffering of others.
So I ask that we show that because you saw what an experience it is to come to New York City, which many of you know about, but you also saw presentations, some of them like NGOs like us. There was pictures in there of the in-person event that we had. I just think that Adele, she did a wonderful job of showing the rich experience that it is to come to CSW in New York. And hopefully we will be able to do this again next year. Julie Steinbach has reminded me several times of this fact, which I share with you, that in the UN Charter, there are only 2 organizations within the United Nations that is mandated to meet every year. One is the General Assembly, and the other is the Commission, the UN Commission on the Status of Women. Usually the commission, which is composed of 45 members, which are elected for 4-year terms, and it's a set formula so that the commission has members from all around the world. Usually they focus on one topic which they explore and then write a report on. This year was different. This year there was just the one theme, and it was a review of the Beijing Conference of 1995 and seeing how far we had come in reaching those goals. Many of us remember, at least I do, that Hillary Clinton went to Beijing when I think she was told she shouldn't do it, but she said she was going to, and made the famous statement about women's rights are human rights. There was, that came out of that conference, a long position paper of what is necessary in progress for women's rights around the world. We had a member with us in New York who has a special family relationship to that event in Beijing. And I want to ask her to speak next and to share what it meant to come to see it, to share her story as she sees it. So Barbara, can you share your story?
Yes, thank you very much, Phyllis. And I just want to say I feel very grateful to be part of this gathering here and to be part of ICUUW. I also really want to thank and have deep gratitude for Julie Steinbach for her guidance and support on my journey to CSW. It is a very personal journey to me. She actually knew my Aunt Mary, who went and was a part of the Beijing conference 30 years ago. They had, my aunt had retired to Pilgrim Place, and that's where she got to know Julie. She was a member of the International Grail, which is a primarily Catholic organization, an international organization of women all over the world who work in education and supporting rights of women in a whole variety of areas. And that she had been a member of that organization up until her death for almost 55 years. And I remember 30 years ago when these seeds were planted that she talked about going to Beijing. I remember going to my father's house and she had this huge map. She actually was part of what they have called the Peace Train, the Women's International League for Freedom, put together this group of people from primarily women, 234 women and 10 men from all over the world who were going. They began in Helsinki, Finland in August and took a 3-week train ride all the way to Beijing to to go to the conference. And along the way, they stopped and met with different organizations of women in various capacities, looking at different issues. And also on the train ride, had many meetings and discussions and looking at what was going on in each of their countries and what were their hopes and goals and dreams for each other as women within their own individual countries and for women as a people. So when she talked with me about this, and then when she came back, and I remember quite vividly about her explaining how revolutionary this was, that they came up with the Beijing platform. And there were 12 strategic areas of concern that throughout the last 30 years, all kinds of countries that have given reports at CSW as to where they are, but I think it's important to mention them. So the 12 areas are women and poverty, education and training of women, women and health, violence against women, women and armed conflict, women and the economy, women in power and decision-making, institutional mechanisms for the advancement of women, the human rights of women, women in the media, women and the environment, and the girl child. So when I think about these goals and how I went to some side events that talked about different countries and how they were continuing to work on these goals, I felt very inspired by listening to some of the panelists talk about it. But I want to talk in particular this event that I went to with Julie and Phyllis and Marjorie, that was a panel that was entitled 30 Years of the Beijing Platform for Action, Looking Back, Pushing Forward. And there were 8 different women who had all been part of Beijing, the CSW, and there were a couple who were there were women who were actually the primary writers of the platform, and they included Selma Musavi, who was from Namibia, Patricia Lukanen, who was from the Philippines, and Charlotte Bunch, who was from the United States, and Gertrude Mandela, who was from Tanzania. And they each took time talking about where they had come in their countries and also the work ahead. What I felt inspired by, 2 main things, was that individually, how each of them had really, in many ways, forged ahead of their own in supporting and representing their own individual countries. There were some of them who went on to become ambassadors, and Gertrude Mandela from Tanzania talked about how she was asked she was the only woman in the delegation of Tanzania who were asked to be part of this delegation to the first Pan-African conference. And these men said, "So are you going to run as maybe vice chair?" And she said no. She was going to become the chair and the president. And she literally became the first president, let alone woman, to be the president of the Pan-African Conference. And then she went on to tell this story that I find just really incredible and also very inspiring, about how there were 3 women from CSW Beijing. One was from Mexico, one was from Tanzania, and one was from Namibia, who at this point all went on to become presidents of their own countries, which I think is an important thing to mark and to say the accomplishment and how the seeds were planted in them and how important that is, that women felt inspired by that and continue to do that work. I think it's also important to say that there was an incredible lot of work that needs to be done that none of these have been fully realized, but really how we need to keep and stay resilient, and to also just continue the work in our own individual countries to meeting these goals, but how together as women, we need to inspire, support each other. And afterwards, I actually got a chance to talk to Charlotte, and she remembers meeting my aunt 30 years ago. And I just felt it was, to me, when I think about this, how I can walk in the world for my aunt, because I talked about this. This is actually how I met Julie, that she died, my aunt died in 2021, and that we had her funeral because of the pandemic. We waited a year, and that's how I got to know Julie. And I remember actually writing her eulogy and talking about how the work of CSW, actually going to Beijing, was one of the most important things that she's ever done. And the work of CSW in talking with her own international Grail community and being part of it was one of the most important work of her life, including the work that she had done with rural women in Ohio and also in Australia, and the work she did with the Philadelphia Grail. So it was an indeed a very personal one. I did get to chance to connect with a couple of friends of hers who were part of her organization and actually have a community in the Bronx, and spend time with them. And I am just incredibly grateful to be part of this community. I feel that the spirit and what we, all of us together, in our own individual countries and within our own faith communities, how we seek to, on a daily basis, and talking about this here on a collective basis, to make this world a better place for women and a better place for all. So I just want to thank you all, and I feel very grateful. I want to thank you to all who are here, and to all the people who came together from ICUUW throughout the time that we were at CSW. We had a wonderful time at the spring seminar, and I feel emboldened and strengthened by being part of this community. So thank you.
And thank you, Barbara. That was a very special story, that it was very personal for you, and as it was for a lot of people that we met there. Thank you for sharing. In reflecting on my own journey to CSW, both going there and participating online, this was my 5th CSW. I came first in 2018, I believe it was. And I think one of the first things to talk about this one is that I am obviously a little older. And I hesitated before I said that I would come to this one, because getting around gets a little harder. So I want to first speak to those people who might hesitate to come for that reason. What I found when I got there was that the yellow cab drivers of New York City are pretty amazing. I cannot tell you how thoughtful they were in bringing a step stool if I had to step up, and seeing that I was comfortable. They got me everywhere, and I just thank them. So for that, in terms of getting around, it was a blessing. We did hear from Anne Greenwood at our prior event, who came, and she did remind us that in some of the events, particularly at the church center, she sometimes had trouble hearing. And so I think this is something that we need to follow up on. We need to be aware of next year when we plan this. But I do encourage you all to come. Getting around is possible. I am here to tell you. So Last week, a friend here at home asked me a question that I have been reflecting on this past week, and is what I want to say when I share this with you. This is a friend who has long been politically active. She's done much work with the YWCA, with United Way and everything. She was also served on the county council for 2 terms. So she was an elected officer. And she asked me the question, which I'd never thought about. She said, did I feel like there was a way in which my organization and or myself can influence UN actions? In other words, small little me and the big UN. And I sort of answered her, but I've really reflected on that question. And how I would answer it today. So my first year in when I went to CSW, the UN office, the UUA office at the UN authorized me to go, and a friend and I went, and I only attended 2 days. One day I went to the side events on the UN campus. And Carol Houston and I went to a program sponsored by the Philippines, by an NGO and the government of the Philippines. And we actually were able to meet with, and we have a picture of it to prove it, we were able to meet the permanent representative of the Philippines to the United Nations. So we were able to share with him directly, and that's the only time that's ever happened, what we were doing in the Philippines. The next day, I went to side events or parallel events that were all held. I spent the day at the Salvation Army. And in the afternoon, there was something called a caucus. And I had no idea what a caucus was. I had no idea about the organization, but the caucus sounded interesting. So I attended the caucus meeting, at which I listened to members of this caucus who had formed this caucus talk about how they were able to interact with the writing of the program. There was a way they could get in at night and share something. And I was really impressed with them. When I went the next year, I also went to the caucus, and I still was not a member of this organization. But I since found out that this is the NGO. It was sponsored by the NGO CSW New York. And the NGO CSW New York, which we can become personal members or association members, are the ones that put on all the parallel events. And as I've gotten to go there, I realized that there are ways through them, through being part of them and supporting them and attending their caucuses, that I think we do have a way to make our ideas known and to share and to be part of the numbers that support what they were doing. Last year at a parallel event, Beth O'Connell and maybe Julie was there. We were at the church center, and there was an organization putting on a program called the U.S. Women's Caucus. And we decided we would go. We did not know what it was, but we found out that the U.S. Women's Caucus is a very active organization at the UN. Many of them are in academia. They do position papers, and we can be part of them in supporting what they do. So Beth and we went back and we asked ICUUW to join the U.S. Women's Caucus, and we are a member. We pay our dues. Our logo is on there, and so we are lending our voice to things that are happening, and I think that is important. Last year, I moderated a CSW panel put on by ICUUW about a microfinance bank that we started in Uganda. And that is the first parallel event that I was part of, that we were putting on, where it drew people outside our organization, outside the United States. I remember there was one person joining us from London wanting to ask a question about starting this bank. And Karen and Laura was contacted by somebody else who wanted to speak with them. So in that way, I think we make a difference. So I'm excited about the possibilities of making the difference. And as I was preparing this today, I found out that I gave a presentation back in during COVID to here, where I had a whole slide where I talked about how, as ICUUW, we get to interact with the United Nations. We get to make written and oral statements. We can organize and attend the parallel events. There are all sorts of things that we can do. And so I want to invite you to join with us on this adventure. This adventure, that's not the right word. We have a mission, and I invite you to join with us on that. So, do we have any questions? I've reached the end of an hour. I hope this has been informative to you.
I know, Gabor has his hand raised. I know he had put something in the chat, so.
Okay.
Hi, I had a very quick question. I was just curious, the parallel session that was held at the Baha'i office, how many people who attended were ICUUW people versus non-ICUUW people?
It was a limited venue because we were around that round table. And so is Carmen still on?
Yeah, she's here.
Carmen, we had Carmen's aunt, but we had four different speakers who were from outside our organization. It was not advertised because of the limited facility and because the Baha'i asked us to register it. It was not just an open one.
Mm-hmm.
There was a limitation there.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Thank you.
Carmen, do you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say that was kind of like a first try. So next year we can do something a little bit more bigger,
Mm-hmm.
and we kind of like know how it works and probably have a government or an authority or someone more important, let's say. But yeah, I think it's important to have our own events and to share our experience, our collective experience, our collective knowledge. Thank you.
All right, I think there's another question. You see the question, Phyllis, or no?
Yeah, it says, are we as ICUUW with consultative status able to craft and present a response impetus for moving forward? There are, well, Atina, do you want to answer that?
So, yes, we are. However, it's not so easy, right? So the way the United Nations works is really that you find other organizations, and then you have a better choice of being heard. So NGO CSW New York was mentioned earlier, and the UN US caucus was mentioned earlier. So we have a bunch of organizations like our organization getting together and then working on statements and working on input that we then provide to various at various points in the process. So not, I would say, Maureen, not alone, because there are just too many organizations, but when we get together with other organizations, then yes.
So am I understanding that the first step then is for us to begin to draft something or come up with something that we can then share with others to see if they would want to be able to join in a collective push for either some priorities or some strategies or some responses to what we saw there?
Yeah. So, and we have in the past signed on to others or participated in drafting statements.
Mm-hmm.
We also have, like I mentioned in my presentation, ECOSOC, where we are accredited, hosts a partnership forum every year. And that's where they want to hear from us. And in preparation for that, they sent out a questionnaire and we submitted our input, which was interesting to me because there were only, I mean, there are 6,000 organizations accredited with ECOSOC.
Right.
But only 300 submitted input. And of those 300, I can't remember, I reported to the board, but there were only a small group of women's organizations. So our voice was pretty loud. So that was another way where we were able to be heard. Yeah. So
That would be,
ways.
yeah, that would be lovely to continue that tradition of making sure those of us who have earned the status use it.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. Very important.
Yeah, I'm certainly happy and eager to be part of such drafting and alliance building.
Great. Good to know.
Good. Good.
Peggy had something too.
Peggy said, with USA budget cuts to UN, how will things continue? I don't know.
Should I take that as well? So Peggy, I skipped over that on purpose because I didn't want to depress us, right? But the United Nations, unfortunately, has withdrawn from, basically, is the official language is that all memberships and all organizations, all are being questioned right now. And so the United States will always do what is best for the United States. That means the United States, for example, is no longer actively supporting the Sustainable Development Goals. The United States is reconsidering its involvement with the United Nations. So yes, we don't know where this is going to go, but we've decided that we are not going to be deterred by it.
Because we're not constrained by any state or national official position. We're a civil society.
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
Hoorah!
Right. Okay, any other? So I just want to thank you all. I want to thank you for being here. I hope you will consider joining with us next year and continuing your support for what we do. If you are interested in our UN Advocacy Committee, it is chaired by Carol Houston. And if you would like to be included, you can send her an email. And I thought that was such an interesting that just reminds me of how interesting the detail was that Carmen shared, how important email was when she started her journey. We take it for granted now, but what an important little detail that changed a life. So anyway, thank you. I would like to end by extinguishing our chalice. We extinguish the flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. We carry these in our hearts until we meet again. Thank you.